Well, welcome back, everybody, to Left Reckoning. David here, as always, joined by my good friend Matt Leck. How's it going, brother?
It's going well, David.
Well, we're really excited here to be talking about this. This is a story close to home, right here in Austin, Texas. The first Starbucks, the first unionized Starbucks, won their vote earlier this month. And we're joined by one of the organizers here, Morgan Leavy, who's an organizer with Starbucks Workers United. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, I mean, we certainly had to because, one of the things that we've been talking on the show about is as these Starbucks unions are sort of, going across the country, you're more likely than not to have something happening in your community, some kind of movement happening in your community, and showing up for these fights is really important to us. But before we get into the campaign, I was just hoping if maybe you could set the stage for folks a little bit about what you and your coworkers were facing at work before the decision to unionize.
So, a big reason why we decided, why we started talking about really, really going for the union at my store specifically was when Starbucks cut labor all around, nationwide. It wasn't just our store experiencing that, but that really affected myself and my partner's schedules. People are already working multiple jobs, and some people aren't. So those hours really, really matter. And so that was honestly just a huge decision by Starbucks that impacted us and started our conversation. Some of the things that happen at Starbucks, one, it's completely unmanageable most days. The influx of customers that we get, we can reach upwards of 80 to 90 customers in a 30-minute span, which is some insane profit for Starbucks with no extra support on the floor during that time. And so, we're moving as fast as possible. And just the same as in factory settings, in food service, the faster you work, the sloppier you are. And so burns happen, injuries happen, prolonged injuries happen too, in the long run working in food service. So needed protection for our bodies. And so those are just a couple of things, that it's kind of like a day in the life at Starbucks that really were impacting us and made us start talking.
And also,
do you remember?
Sorry,
Go ahead,
Matt.
David.
I just wanted to follow up on this real quick because one thing that I think folks might not realize when you're talking about those staffing issues is that Starbucks tries to present itself as a job opportunity to folks who might not have full availability, right? It's something that they sort of push it as oh, you can go to school while you're doing this, or maybe have a second job. And when you start cutting labor like that, it really puts a lot of pressure on those workers.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone, not just Starbucks, preaches about Starbucks healthcare, which you need to consistently have 20 hours on the schedule in order to qualify for the healthcare. So that's just one reason. And I think it's around 6 hours a week to get their ASU benefit for college students and things like that. So yeah, for sure. It definitely impacts even the benefits that they offer you. Yeah.
I'm curious about if any early moments that stick out as far as you and your coworkers becoming conscious that, okay, we need to do this together. Because I myself was a barista in college at Caribou Coffee, and as this has been going on, I've just been running through my mind thinking about the hypothetical things I could have been talking about instead of just scrolling Twitter the entire time I was there. I'm just curious about any moments like that stick out to you.
Sure. I think the whole Buffalo situation started in the fall. That's when we were told, we have these meetings with our store manager where they're just kind of a connect. It's not a formal meeting, but we would connect with our manager and they would say, hey, I'm sure you've heard about what's going on in Buffalo. If any customer asks you what you think about it, you're not supposed to tell them. And so that was kind of a first indicator, why? Like, why? This isn't political. I'm not
Mhm.
endorsing a political candidate by talking about Buffalo unionizing. These are fellow partners. I don't really understand why. And I think that sparked some low level conversation to start. But once Buffalo in like the January kind of time um, started, they actually won their union. That's when I had one specific coworker. She started walking around to all of our partners with a little card that said "Want to unionize?" And
Mm.
so we weren't actually like having verbal conversations at work, but she would walk over and like, show you. And so then after work, if anyone was thinking about it, we started having conversations with her. And that's how
Mm.
me, her, and my other friend who's a shift supervisor, began our proto committee. Because we were the three that were the most interested from the start. But yeah, that's some things that stick out from that
That's
time.
fascinating.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I could imagine that things y'all are facing at work, and then seeing these campaigns moving. Is there anything else? Like, I mean, actually, like, let's start to move into like the campaign and how y'all were thinking about it, because you know this isn't the first time that people have tried to unionize Starbucks, but it's by far the most successful.
Yes.
And if you have any thoughts as to why that is, feel free to chime in. But I also wanted to note that, like, one of the things that's been exciting about both the Starbucks campaigns and some of the other campaigns that we're seeing right now is that people are realizing that a union is for everybody. And there's like a lot of propaganda out there that sort of can be hard to work through. It's like, well, I'm not like a blue collar factory worker. Like that's like the archetype of like what a union member is. And like, how did that process sort of go in your mind, and the conversations around that start to develop?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm trying to think about the beginning of your question.
Oh yeah, no worries.
um, sorry, can you?
Oh yeah, yeah. No,
Why
I was
why
just
now was the beginning?
Yeah, like
Why
why
is this
why
time
now? Like
different?
what on top of the Starbucks movement, yeah, just like why now did this feel viable?
Yeah, sure. Um, Honestly, timing is everything. Like,
Hmm.
I think that we're living in such an interesting time, as people are calling it post-COVID, even though COVID is still, here to stay. um, yeah, I think 2020 as a
Hmm.
year was, I mean, historically groundbreaking in a lot of ways. But if you think about um, our population at Starbucks, most partners are young adults, and a lot of them are college students. So we're already having these conversations with our
Hmm.
friends. We
Hmm.
watched during the pandemic, like, we've just watched corporations get richer and richer. And as we sit here, like, what the heck? If I have to take off work because I get sick, am I going to get paid? Wait, okay, yeah, sure, for a little bit I can get paid, but now they took that away. Like,
Hmm.
and so I think people are already having these conversations with their friends. And if you're on social media at all, which most of, like, Gen Z / millennials are, um, yeah, this information is everywhere. People are constantly retweeting and sharing these stories of people struggling, and or CEOs getting richer. And I think that timing was everything with that. People were starting to feel fed up and feeling like, okay, the world is burning. How long are we going to be on this earth with climate change? Like,
Hmm.
if we need to make things better, um, in many different sectors of life. But I think this was one measurable way to feel like we had a voice, and like had a way to change what labor looks like in this country.
And just I know like here in Texas, like it might be different from other places, but one of the things that was notable when we were talking to Nick Bolin, who wrote a really long piece in the Guardian about one of the successful campaigns in Denver, Colorado, was how Starbucks partners were really put on the front line of trying to enforce mask and COVID policy with customers, which was sometimes not the easiest thing in the world to do. I mean, could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I worked for Starbucks twice. I've worked at
Mhm,
this Austin not drive-through Starbucks since September of
mhm.
2021, but I actually did work for Starbucks in 2020, July 2020, at a drive-through store in Colorado. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and I lived in a rural area. Colorado is you kind of think of Colorado and you think of the Front Range that is typically more
Mhm,
progressive, but I lived on the western slope in Montrose, which is quite split. Um, and yeah, we, there are already a lot of so-called Karens that come into Starbucks. Some people who are entitled sometimes. And TikTok has served to make that a little bit worse with the sharing of fun, very long recipes and whatnot. But with the masking, that was hard because Starbucks was enforcing masking even when the mandate, especially in the rural area I was in, was
mm,
pretty lifted, even early on into the pandemic. And so we had plenty of people who were super respectful, um, and and then plenty of people where you had to ask them to move it up over their nose, due to policy, and just feeling like, okay, I as a worker am here every day, almost all day, interacting with hundreds of people a day.
mhm,
It could be easy for me to catch it, so like, please be respectful of me at least.
mhm.
um, but we did have some people who would storm out or yell profanities. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad
That's good.
consistently, but we did have some people who definitely did not respect that, and never did.
Well, I mean, it just goes to highlight, some of the issues with work in general and working at Starbucks, where it's like, people are sort of being put onto the front lines of this very content. People feel very strongly about that policy, and
Yes.
like you need the company to be looking out and protecting their employees from incidents. But I don't want you to give out the whole playbook here. But if you could maybe just paint a picture for people who might be curious about maybe some of the inner workings, maybe somebody who might be interested in pursuing something like this, at their own workplace or even at a Starbucks, what the kind of general timeline was for y'all and how y'all were sort of, getting together and talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, we organized our store really quickly,
Mm,
because we had already surveyed over a few months in these casual conversations who was kind of interested and not. And we had a feeling that the majority of our store was on board already.
mhm.
So we were the second store in Austin to petition at 45th and Lamar. And uh, 24th and Nueces was on, I think it was like the 6th or the 9th of March or something. It was a Monday. I remember it was a Monday. We were all freaking out because we saw their letter posted on Twitter. And me and my two friends, Eric and Sarah, instantly started talking like, okay, is it go time? Like,
Mhm.
should we do it? And so we emailed them. They got us in contact with their people in Buffalo, and we had a Zoom call that night.
Wow.
So the Buffalo workers, man, they have just been on top of it, and like, I'm sure that it's getting harder and harder as the weeks go on and this grows. Which later of how we're handling that, but yeah. So within that week, I think it was like about 5 days, we got 79% of our store to sign union cards.
Wow.
Myself and Eric were driving to people's places, meeting up after work or on their lunch break to get them to sign the union cards. Meanwhile, I was also having conversations with partners who were on the fence, who are asking like, am I going to get my benefits taken away? Why aren't you scared about this? And I said, well, I've been educated on why that's not true and why they're using fear tactics with us. So I was getting coffee with partners, just making sure that I could ease their
Mhm.
anxieties and whatnot. And so, yeah. And then once we got our cards signed, I connected with our local lawyer, and we got our letter out 2 weeks on the dot after
Wow.
25th and Oasis. And so, um, yeah, that was that little period. And then we had a good like 2 months, 2.5 months in there, until we had our vote count, because Starbucks at the time had been having hearings with each store, trying to argue that we should not be allowed to vote as a singular store unit, and that we should have to vote as a district, and that the districts were so fundamentally intertwined, is what they kept saying. They were like so fundamentally intertwined that it should be required that we vote as a district, which of course they were just trying to stall and make sure that they got as many people on board so that it would be harder for us to win. So we had our hearing a few weeks in, and we won our hearing. And that meant that we were able to vote as a store, and we were trying to vote in person, but they like had at that point not really had a lot of in-person votes, so we did mail-in, and then we won. So
and you'll win by good margin too. We got to note that, right? 10-1.
Yeah, 10-1, and we had, I think, 5 or 6 challenged votes, and just based on conversations with those partners, I knew that it would have been a larger margin had those votes not been challenged and counted. But yeah, we were almost unanimous. But it's all good. It's all good though. The morale of the partners is generally super on board, and like we're a union now, so it doesn't matter.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. But yeah, for other partners who are looking to get involved in this, we have this beautiful system set up now on the Starbucks Workers United like main website, where all you have to do is type in your information and your store and what state you're in, and the OG people get you connected with the representatives in your area, so that you can feel connected pretty much right away and start on what you need to get started on.
Did y'all have any of those now infamous meetings with ownership about the process of unionizing during that in-between period?
We didn't. Yeah, our manager is really great. You know, if anything has been like an unfair labor practice of sorts, like it never seemed super malicious, at least carried out by our management. I think it's just kind of something that's a top-down thing. It's like, if I don't do it, I'm going to lose my job. Well, if I don't do it, I'm going to lose my job, you know? And that's how the whole thing has been working for them. But no, we had a store meeting about a week before 24th and New England. So the movement was growing, and we had a meeting as a store where our district manager was there, and they were like, look at how great Starbucks is. We have all of these wonderful benefits. Like, we want to make sure that you know. And we like went over dress codes too, which is kind of weird, which then eventually was much more enforced after we petitioned, and we had been historically a very lax store like culture. So that was the only meeting that we had, and honestly that was the thing that pushed me over the edge. After I had that meeting, I found out that I was not able to get my healthcare benefits until October, and I have not been covered since like last summer. So I was angry. And I was like, all right, let's go.
You know,
well, I know that.
What's the reaction been? Because we saw Starbucks weigh into the the attack on trans people, saying we might take away your healthcare if you think about this. And I'm just curious about that part. And is there any notable internal reaction to Howard Schultz's different gambits, whether it's like bringing up the Holocaust sort of weirdly, or talk about NFTs? Like, is Howard Schultz being persuasive?
We have lots of feelings about Howard Schultz. I personally have lots of feelings about Howard Schultz. Yeah, I don't think that Howard has been persuasive. I think he has been inflammatory, if anything. I think some people were like, oh, cool, like Howard's coming back for the 3rd time. let's see if he makes some positive changes, and at least from like a management perspective, that has been what a lot of people have been looking, at least towards the beginning when he came back. But as he stayed around and made further blatant statements to the public about how Starbucks will not engage with the union, Howard keeps talking about trust.
Mm-hmm.
And how much trust matters with the partners and with the customers and whatever. And I think we said this in our letter, that there's been a fundamental erosion of trust throughout the pandemic and into now especially. And honestly, the more he speaks to the public, I feel like the more personally I have absolutely no trust in him. The only way that they will restore trust is engaging with the union at this point. So that's how I feel about that.
Hey, you can always redeem yourself, Howard. And the steps
For
are
real.
okay.
I mean, everyone can. Yeah, you can redeem yourself. Has not done that so far.
And on that note, like the values of Starbucks, like we had Jazz Brissack. I produced a Majority Report. We had Jazz Brissack on earlier this week, and
cool.
It's the type of people that Starbucks recruits are these socially aware folks, right? So like this, it would be consistent with those values to be a pro-union company, and I think everybody would feel a lot better if you can go get your latte and know that those workers are protected by a union.
Absolutely. Yeah, my background is in social work. So I mean, like, a social work core value is like advocacy. So I was on top. I've been on top of that. That's always been a part of me, and that's also a big reason why I liked Starbucks, even though it was bigger and kind of turning into a fast food chain. I was like, well, at least they have some good values, and to see that not be followed through on is a problem. Like that's what so many of us say, is that like people are like, oh, why don't you leave? You can get another job that doesn't make you this mad and whatever. And it's like, okay, but we believe in the values that Starbucks preaches, and we can see that they are still trying to like release policies around these abortion bans and things like that are really progressive and really beautiful, and we are not arguing with those things. They have been historically trans affirming and especially with the healthcare, and specifically in my store, it's such a safe space for queer partners that you just don't find in a lot of other places. It was ahead of its time in that way, and so it is super disappointing to feel like that's why we're trying to hold them accountable to what they say they're all about.
One thing that like we've noted a lot on the show is like, if it's in situations that unfortunately like aren't as positive as y'all's, where people are getting terminated in the process of unionizing, the role of like community support, can be so important. And I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about your experience with that during the campaign.
Sure. News for our store was slow rolling. We had only a handful of people who would come in and always had their name as like Union Strong, or like the first day we got like Slay Unions, which was funny and very appropriate for our store culture. But it was slow rolling after we petitioned, but as the vote count got closer, news was spreading, and we were doing more media and stuff, so people were watching the news and whatnot. And the support has been overwhelming in the best way. Honestly, it made it so worth it to not just be happy amongst ourselves, but have people coming in saying like, I haven't been to, like older men or women saying, I haven't been to Starbucks in 10 years and here I am, that was really beautiful and so affirming to us. Like, okay, cool. Like, our community supports us, and we have a lot of regulars that I have been coming to our store for 6+ years and know our manager well and all this stuff. And so it's been really, really cool to feel that support. And especially like now we have like a customer pledge and stuff, as across the board, for all stores, saying like, hey, as a customer, like if we ask you as partners to like do something and support, like please pledge to do so. And I have no doubt that people are going to follow through on that.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's been really exciting to see. And then also, this kind of wildfire moment here in Texas where we're starting to see more success at locations across Austin and the state. This is a little bit of a broad question. So, take it however you'd like. But we have a lot of people who listen to this program, who might be interested in maybe pursuing an action like this, and they might not have the infrastructure like there is in the Starbucks union, right? But as somebody who's now gone through this process and ended up on the other side, if you're sitting here, pre-deciding to organize and be a part of this, what kind of questions do you think people should be asking themselves? What kind of things should they be thinking about? And maybe what kind of things they should know and be prepared for if they're considering, pursuing a union?
Sure. So you're saying people who are not like a part, like not partners.
I mean, if you have something specifically for Starbucks, that's all well. It just like, a lot of people just don't have the experience, and unions are very confusing to folks in this country. So like they don't know really what they are. They don't really know what they can do. And sometimes people might feel like they want one, but there's this huge step in between, like you deciding that you want to have union representation and then getting everybody else on board.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think everything, for one, everything starts with a conversation. If you have a closely like tight knit, or not even super tight knit, but like you talk with your coworkers, that's where it starts. Like being able to have those conversations, and that if you have those relationships, or deciding to create those relationships with your coworkers, I think that's a first step. That there's a lot of thinking and processing and reflecting that happens first before you make the move to be like, I'm gonna see if I can get connected with someone who can help me start this. I think like if you are an hourly worker, like, and you frequently think about how you're unable to pay your bills from your pay, you can't afford the healthcare that they offer you, if they offer any healthcare. If there's like frequent injuries on the job, and I don't know, things like policies like seniority pay, or something that Starbucks doesn't do yet, we don't have credit card tips. Like if those things aren't in place, like those are the things you should be thinking about, that a union could help with. And yeah. I'm trying to think. Sorry, I have like ADHD. I might need to be prompted again.
Oh no, you're on fire. I mean, just lastly, because it's one of the things I think is so great about organized labor, is how it brings people together. And I'm just curious if you feel closer to your partners and coworkers now that you have come through this and are on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were already close, but yeah, I feel like we're close on a different level because we're like fighting together, like movements bring people together. And it's also gotten us connected with our local DSA. I didn't know, I'm a newer Austin resident. And so that's been really cool, feeling like I have a community already. That's really beautiful. I have a background, and I'm Mennonite, like I'm a Pennsylvania Dutch, and that has always been a core value in my life and my family's community. And I believe that entirely for anyone, regardless of religion, or anything. Community is imperative to the human experience being joyful. And yeah, I think it really has brought us together, especially those on the committee, or even like the shift supervisors amongst themselves, like talk more, I think, than before, maybe, about what's going on and if they've noticed anything shady happening, or things like that. But yeah, it's been it's been really cool. We have a, I don't know if it's a unique experience, but we were already super tight. So, but yeah, it definitely has. I think it was cool for me personally to like let my partner see the more leadership side of me. Because I don't know, I've always been that person, but at work, I never really thought about promoting specifically at Starbucks. So it's been cool to have a different take on leadership in our workplace. Yeah.
I mean, that's beautiful. Like with all the, we talk about like neoliberal alienation and everything. Turns out that actually like organizing with your fellow coworkers is a way to fight that and actually bring community in the sort of bowling for a Columbine sort of sense. So that's, I mean, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and best of luck as y'all move forward and win a contract.
Yeah, thank you so much. The bargaining process is crazy. We're organizing on a regional level now. We're getting those things put in place, and it's exciting. Hoping for good stuff.
Oh, well, I'm super excited to see what happens next. Well, everybody, this was Morgan Leavy, who is a successful now organizer at Starbucks Workers United. We really appreciate the time you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.